Good morning, everybody, and I'm sorry that I'm between you and your next cup of tea. It's late. I'm Sarah Robertson. I am Chief Product Officer at Experian Marketing Services. I'm thrilled to be here today. We're reshaping the industry with super signal aggregators. We've heard a lot about AI, we've heard a lot about signal, but we're really at this pivotal moment right now. Traditional signals like third-party cookie IDs, I know we're all fed up of hearing about those. Device IDs and other deterministic identifiers have always been unreliable. That's not going to change, and they continue to be so. Fragmentation is growing, so we talked about the different channels of the open internet. That's growing. Consumer expectations are higher than ever. Consumers expect you to know them. They expect you to understand and personalize those ads. And yet, the need for demonstrable performant marketing is greater than ever. So people want their marketers' budgets are being squeezed. They want to know what's working. So that's really driven by consumer understanding. So we're at this multifaceted, complex people where we need to really understand consumers and what motivates them. So in comes the super signal aggregator. So thank you, Kieran, for your sketch. We love a Kieran sketch. I'm sure everybody does. So that's really the power of a super signal aggregator, that lies in their ability to stitch consumer dimensions that go beyond the single view. From demographics, so who a consumer is, so how old they are, what gender they are, all of those basic things, to the mobility insights, so where they live, where they shop, how they travel. Well, everybody tried to travel today, but attitudinal signals, so what they believe, value, and aspire to are really important as well. So that's really important in the messaging. And then contextual signals and the curation of those audiences together, and behavioral and transactional details, so what they're actually buying. These dimensions bring us more from audience targeting to audience understanding, and that's where real personalization grows. This is where we can really train those AI models. A super signal aggregator aggregates all of these signals, enriches the signals, really brings that consumer to life for marketeers. It's able to activate those signals. So it makes those signals addressable across channels, across CTV, across all the other open web channels. It really drives that. And it also talks measurement. So it really actually brings that together so you can measure the impact, change the algorithms, and really learn. But they don't do it alone. So they really work in collaboration with publishers to improve publisher yield. They work with platforms to make those signals actionable. And it's really that driving of consumer privacy and that true privacy view to deliver that greater relevance across each of those channels. So with that, I'm going to ask the panel to come to the stage where we will try and go into this in a bit more detail. I'm going to really unpack it today. So Bedir, Ben, and Piers, welcome to the stage. So thank you for joining me here today. So Ben, straight into you, please, with a question to the buy side, because the buy side are really where drives the requirements in terms of where we've come from. So what do you see as the biggest impact of super signal aggregators on agency strategy, and how are you adapting your media planning and buying approaches in response?
Well, I think that I'm going to take a step back really quickly here, because as an agency, we're looking at on and offline media. And I think before we get into the tech, you've got to remember there's an awful lot of stuff that isn't bought programmatically. And that is the crucial context, because the way we're looking at it is it's very, very fragmented at the moment. You're trying to find your audience, you're doing quant, you're doing qual analysis, you'll make this amazing audience enriched in, this phenomenal persona. And then suddenly you're like, how do I actually buy that? How do I find those people? And that's where it all falls down at the moment, because you're going into the ecosystem, you're going into the DSPs, the data partners, the SSPs. You're trying to find certain signals that, as best as you can, align to those audiences. Very, very expensive, like the last talk just referenced, because you're layering in lots of different technology partners there, and you're not really reaching always the people you want to reach. I'll give a great example, because with one of our charity partners that we inherited for a new biz process, they'd just spent ages and a lot of money building these audiences using signals they felt they could buy, but when you actually looked into the audience, the reason that people supported this cause was connection to the cause, a personal connection and things like that. And none of that audience work, it all ignored it. It was the single biggest factor. So I think if we can look at this new technology to actually start joining those dots up and finding these people throughout in a much more efficient way, it completely changes the way that we go through that process. You're using the original signals from these platforms to inform the audience you should be going after, rather than the other way round. And you're buying it, as I just said, in a much more efficient way. There's far fewer steps in between. And I think that over the next couple of years, we'll really see that evolution, a step away from DSPs holding as much power as they do now.
Yeah, I think you're right. It all starts with that consumer understanding and what's going to drive them to buy. And then that drives what audience you're creating and how you're going to create that audience. So Bedir, how do you ensure that signals you collect are truly actionable for advertisers? And what role can SSAs play in enable content monetization and deeper audience understanding for you at News?
Well, I guess the short answer is we actually are hoping that these super signal aggregators will actually start to use our signals. I mean, publishers, I think it's very well understood that publishers for a very long time have invested very heavily in generating extremely high quality first-party data, interest-based data, demographic data, zero-party data from our direct relationships. And there's been, many, many false starts with regards to that data being actually used and activated. Things like seller-defined audiences, topics, publisher-provided signals. None of these have actually really taken off at scale. And I think whilst it's understood that publishers have, invested in their DMPs and have incredibly rich first-party data, it's probably still less understood that the buy side is still buying, still ignoring this data on the whole. They are using scraped and inferred data that's been generated by intermediary companies. And so as a publisher, all we really hope is that our data is actually used, because it's incredibly valuable, it's incredibly rich, but the current ecosystem isn't really set up to ingest and activate that. Where we have seen advertisers go directly to the source and start to use publisher signals through, there's some great examples out there through things like Sky and Permitive, the DMP, for example. Not only are they reaching audiences that are really untapped by the current ecosystem, which is so heavily reliant on cookies, for example, which we know only reach a third, 25% of the open internet currently. But we start to see that they achieve incredible outcomes. And these large companies have the ability to actually measure outcomes beyond last click, and they see the impact of that. And so from a publisher's point of view, we have this data. We find it quite shocking, actually, that it's so little used currently by the programmatic ecosystem, that the buy side think they're accessing this data, but they're actually not. They're accessing, as I say, intermediary data. And we hope it just becomes part of the waterfall that the super signal aggregators are generating, where if we can tell you what the context of an article is, use that first. If we can't, fine, use an intermediary. If we know that customer and they've told us their age, take the age data from us. If we don't know it, fine, use an intermediary. But it should be a waterfall based on quality, based on what's available. Publishers should be part of that mix, obviously not all of it, but part of it at the very least. And I think that's where the SSAs can really start to add some huge value, is to create this sort of hierarchy of quality and usage, and publisher data just becomes part of that.
Yeah, I can remember when we first met and you described some of that data as dirty data.
Not my data.
Not your
my
data,
nice
but some of the intermediary data actually.
Filthy, yeah.
And not all data is equal, and actually understanding that and using the most compliant, performant and transparent data is key in all of these decisions.
Absolutely, and it's, you used the word performance, absolutely, but it's, what is performance as well? It's not, again, it's not just, we've heard earlier today that it's not just about performance, it's about brand, it's about shifting perception, and again, I think that's using the right data for those other outcomes is going to be incredibly important as well.
Completely agree. Piers, talk us through how the acquisition of Audigent has helped shape Experian as a SSA.
Good question, obviously. I think, there's multiple points here, buy side and sell side. I think you've actually just helped me, quite frankly, in that answer. Clearly, Experian is the gold standard in data and identity solutions. That's globally, not just in the US. I think Audigent was always known as being a leading sell-side curator, sell-side decisioning, optimization, and publisher first-party data through our DMP and code on page. Trying not to make this a sales pitch in any way, but I think it was just a natural synergy, quite frankly, of two companies, one on the buy side, one on the sell side, much to what Andrew was discussing earlier about a platform coming together. And Experian doesn't make buying decisions or M&A decisions overnight. It was a 3-year process. They became friends. They worked together. They invested on contextually index-linked audiences, for example, using Experian deterministic data, and then using our contextual signals with code on page to create probabilistic and inferred audiences, which work really well. And I think Experian could see the opportunity of sell-side decisioning, and obviously we could see the opportunity from a sales angle, and that's why I think Experian bought Audigent.
Great.
Does that answer your question?
Perfect. And what innovations do you foresee in the next sort of 12 to 18 months of the partnership?
Beautiful things. I'm a big platform fan. I personally would love to see a platform provided by Experian, and I think it should focus on onboarding first-party data, optimization, activation of data, attribution, and measurement. I know that's what we're also building, but I think that would be the thing that would be game-changing for the industry. I also think with Experian's financial firepower, in terms of M&A, it's one of the few companies in the industry that could significantly invest in the industry. I don't like the concept of walled gardens, but I think Experian touches DSPs, SSPs, publishers, brands direct, offline, online data. It's a very interesting company to move into this space in terms of digital activation. So I think platforms, and obviously off the back of that is the investment in AI and machine learning, which will reduce costs, it will improve optimization, and hopefully make you a little bit happier finding the audiences you want.
And then what about measurement, Bedir? How are you evolving your measurement frameworks?
Well, if someone comes directly to us, as with all premium publishers, we can optimize to a number of outcomes, right? We can optimize to performance, of course, but then things like viewability, attention. We partner with attention businesses out there, and then brand metrics. We can optimize campaigns towards awareness, consideration, and intent. If you try and translate that to a scalable buy bought programmatically across the ecosystem, it's really still not there. We know. Performance has always been the case. We know what a poor metric that can be. Viewability, great. We shifted to viewability 5 years ago. It's frankly being gamed. As we know, by the more murky websites that are out there. The shift to attention is incredibly positive, but there's still so much more that can be done. Not least looking at real retail data for outcomes. And so, as a publisher, we know that the current ecosystem has underreported the impact we've had, especially on the mid-funnel, which is where publishers can have a huge impact. I feel like with measurement and the super signal aggregators, companies like Experian that have sort of ID spines that could plug into the retailer data, the actual outcome data, we can start to really understand, which parts of the funnel, which parts of the ecosystem are contributing to these outcomes. Now, as a publisher, I may have a fairly passive relationship on that, but we want to be part of that. We fully support that because we believe that we are playing a much bigger role than is currently quantified through, even the more advanced sort of attribution and sort of multimedia mix modeling that's out there currently. We've seen with things like CAPI, conversion APIs, that this kind of flow of data between the buy side and the sell side is becoming more accessible. We know that IAB Tech Lab are sort of trying to sort of create ways to standardize that, to make that more accessible to more parts of the ecosystem, because CAPI is, still quite contained within the walled gardens. And so hopefully in the near future, being able to understand the role that every part of the ecosystem has played and link that back to real-world outcomes that go way beyond was an ad clicked on, which is frankly shit, as we all know, is going to be really important. And I think, personally, that's going to be incredibly positive for publishers, but it will be incredibly positive for the whole ecosystem as well.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head with outcomes, because that's what marketers want to see, don't they? They want to see, actually, what did it drive? A click only tells so much. Someone just engaged with it or made a mistake. So that's in terms of that. Ben, from your perspective, how do you see the change in the way measurement is done for campaigns?
Yeah, I think for too long we were hung up on media metrics, vanity metrics, not outcomes, like you've just been talking about, actual business outcomes. A tangible thing that is going to make a difference to your bottom line, essentially. If you go back a decade or so, it was a hell of a lot easier. You were able in this measurement solutions to be able to put all of your digital activity through an ad server. It was a single source of the truth. You didn't really have to worry about cross-device or GDPR or cookie drop-off or whatever, and you had that view. And obviously that's been eroding over the past decade as a robust way of measurement. But what's happened is, for a lot of our clients, they've been very used to, in that incredibly linear way, I put £1 in, I got £2 out type scenario, and getting that instantly as well. And so what I see as the future is there's already a lot of technology out there which is able to do this stuff, which is using all these signals, not just cookies. But the problem is each of these solutions are living in isolation within each of the platforms. So then the client says, I can't just add them all up. I've got more conversions in your dashboard than I've got sales, that I'm seeing. So that's where it starts getting complicated in seeing the true value of it. But I think that the more data that you can supply that shows, like you were mentioning, especially the mid-funnel, right? Because it's not just modelled conversions and things like this. It's how you take somebody from that awareness into that consideration, that messy middle, where so many KPIs and things that we're measuring, if I'm honest, have historically been very wrong, and we need to look at that, and then through to that final sort of sale and things. So I see all these data points feeding in, and I think those technology platforms that lean in and supply their data to somebody that can aggregate it across on and offline media, that feed it into media mix models and incremental models and things like that at a very high level, will do extremely well, because they'll be very popular with agencies and clients alike.
Do you see this as unlocking new opportunities for your clients then?
Definitely, absolutely. I think that it will prove the value of media that's currently been undervalued, really badly. If you're driving really great engagement with your content, somebody sat there and done, watched a really long piece of video content. They have, come through to your site and had really good dwell time, but not gone on to, undertake a transaction, that sort of thing. These are the things that are all undervalued so much at the moment. That engagement, that bit that drives people in, increases their knowledge, pushes them towards conversion, etc., and all the things that and loyalty and all these other key metrics that these organisations are looking for. So I actually think that there's a huge opportunity for investment in these sorts of channels and platforms to go up once we get the right measurement in place.
Thank you. And no panel discussion is ever complete without talking AI. So Piers, I'm going to come to you with the first question. So AI is increasing, the power of it is increasing. It was interesting to hear neural networks being talked about earlier. What challenges do you see AI solving for SSAs?
Okay. I was like, world peace. I think it's going to take longer than people think, personally speaking. I think there's a lot of work, whether it's custom bidding, whether it's pricing, improvements with AI, whether it's probabilistic outcome, whether it's synthetic data sets. All of that is just a part of AI. As the concept of agentic AI, again, what's it really doing? I think in the future, we're talking over 2 years, it does have the promise to reshape our entire world. But specifically for advertising and media, I think it could cut out a large proportion of intermediaries. I think true efficiency will begin to really reveal itself. It will be impossible to avoid that. The data will speak for itself. It will become harder and harder to game a system, and the proof will literally be in the pudding. There are concerns about who has what definition of AI, who's in control of the tech, who's in control of the platform. I think we should be cognizant of that at all times. I can only see great improvements for the whole ecosystem, but it will be painful for much of the ecosystem, just as it probably will for the world as we adapt to this immense new technology.
Bedir, have you got anything that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, as someone who sits at the sort of one end of the scale, we see still how inefficient the programmatic ecosystem is, and how little money makes it through to work in media, what type of data is actually being used to inform the bid, how little reach actually a lot of campaigns get. So I think with AI, without trying to oversimplify, a lot of it does boil down to compute, and it's been talked about earlier today. Being able to sort of change the model to be able to ingest new types of data, new signals, some of it, non-standardized, messy, being able to make these sort of decisionings in real time using these new data points, understand outcomes, make optimizations in real time. A lot of this boils down to just the sheer computing necessary. We know that, SSPs are throttling the bids they're sending to the DSPs because the DSPs can't, cope with that amount of data currently. I think 90% of information is currently throttled. So a lot of it will boil down to compute, and I think that's going to be table stakes. Where the super signal aggregators have their power and can create their moats, I think will be sort of the algorithms that the AI also provides. So not just the compute, but the ability to understand, well, for this outcome and for this person and for this company, here's the signals that are most predictive. Here's the data that's correlated. Here's where the other pockets of these people can be found. And that's where the algorithm of the AI, constantly learning, constantly adapting, taking in new signals, making predictions, testing those predictions, that's where it's going to become incredibly powerful. So I think, compute, and then also the power of the algorithm and the different businesses that build those algorithms and how they sort of differentiate themselves will be interesting to see.
I think quality, I'm going to keep coming back to quality of data and the quality and actually driving the right decisions with the right, removing the bias as well, because obviously the more a model learns, the more it increases the bias potentially within that model and becoming too hyper-targeted. And Ben, from your perspective, from a client viewpoint, what are you seeing the demand?
I think sort of AI in general, where you've seen uptake and where it's really taken off is where it's really simple. It solves something that is a mundane, repetitive task. It automates it, and it takes the output that would have been done by somebody to a whole nother level, because obviously the sheer power of it, what it's able to do. So I still think, even with all this amazing technology that we've got, there are still teams of people and brilliant experts behind it, pulling the strings and propping that technology up, now and again, etc. So I think that all those tasks, if you can start actually truly automating some of the bits where we are still requiring, human intervention and things like this, the automation there, and like we mentioned, all the way through. So we talked obviously about finding the target audience with signals, but through to measurement as well. If the AI can start feeding that through into these business outcomes, etc., you've got that data then at your fingertips as a planner to be able to determine, right, I can really see that there is a robust reason why I should be moving budget from here to here, and so on. And increasingly, that will be, of course, omni-channel. And that will, as the programmatic continues to grow into more traditional media, you'll be able to fluidly move budget between different channels, platforms, but also tactics that are for conversion, mid and upper funnel, all in the blink of an eye.
Great, thank you. And thank you to Piers and Bedir as well. I hope you found that insightful. And what's clear from today's discussion is that SSAs are more than a technical solution. It's a strategic shift. And right now, we're just scratching the surface of what's possible. The challenge ahead is how we collaborate effectively to deliver better, faster outcomes for the ecosystem and more authentic value for consumers. Thank you for today.